The sound of a camera shutter is a heart-stopping thing. It's not a click. It's a snap. A tiny metallic fracture. I was standing on the marble steps of the Jefferson Hotel, my hand tucked into the crook of my husband David's arm, a smile fixed on my face like part of the decor. The flash was for the senator, of course. But in the bleached afterimage, across a sea of black tie and champagne flutes, I saw him. Marcus, leaning against a pillar in a simple dark suit that didn't belong. He wasn't looking at the spectacle. He was looking at me. And in that one shattered second, everything, the murmur of the crowd, the weight of my pearls, the pleasant pressure of David's hand, melted into a silent, screaming hum, because he wasn't supposed to be here, and I wasn't supposed to love him. That look, raw and unguarded, was a truth so loud it drowned out every carefully rehearsed line of my life. Before we continue, drop your city and time in the comments, and thanks for listening to my story. Now back to the story. My name is Olivia Grant. For 28 years, I was the curator of a museum no one visited but everyone admired. Our world, in the right zip code of Washington, D.C., was one of soft power and hard boundaries. The air always carried a note of hydrangea from the landscapers, and the faint, clean sting of betrayal, carefully sanitized. My role was simple. Be appealing, be appropriate, be an asset. My marriage to David Chambers was the final logical piece of that puzzle. He was the son of a federal judge, a rising star at a white shoe law firm. He was kind in an absent-minded way, handsome in a catalog model sort of line, and he never, ever raised his voice. Our home in Georgetown was a masterpiece of beige and silence. We discussed policy, portfolios, and the polite tragedies of people we knew. We never discussed the desert spreading between us in our king-sized bed. I thought that numb quiet was contentment. I thought the cage was the sky. The first real crack wasn't dramatic. It was a whisper. A Tuesday evening in late fall. I told David I'd joined a new book club, a detail he absorbed with a pleasant nod over the Financial Times. The lie felt cold in my throat. I drove my sensible luxury car across the river, my heart hammering a frantic rhythm against my ribs. The Community Justice Initiative was in a battered brick building that shared a block with a check-cashing place and a faded, quirky diner. Down a flight of stairs, the basement clinic hummed with a different energy, a thick mix of worry, sweat, and stubborn hope. Here, I was just Olivia, a law student, eager to help. I wore jeans and my hair in a ponytail. For 3 hours a week, I was invisible, and it was the most seen I'd ever felt. Marcus found me in my third week. I was drowning in a stack of tenant harassment paperwork, my pen hovering over a clause I didn't fully understand. "You're using the wrong precedent." His voice was low, matter of fact. He didn't introduce himself. He just reached over, his forearm brushing mine, and tapped the paper. His skin was warm. "The Green Viers County ruling, not the city one. It changes the leverage." He smelled like copy paper and the crisp, cold air from outside. I looked up, flustered. He had the kind of face that wasn't trying to be anything. Dark, thoughtful eyes, hair that needed a cut, a shadow of stubble that spoke of long hours, not calculated scruff. He saw my confusion, not my pedigree. "It's a common mistake," he said, and for the first time, a slight, tired smile touched his eyes. "The system's built on obscure mistakes." We fought. Not angrily, but fundamentally. He was a public defender who'd grown up watching the law work for some and against most. I was a product of institutions that were the law. He'd talk about systemic failure, and I'd parry with ideals of incremental reform, phrases I'd heard at donor dinners. One night, after we'd stayed late to prep a case for a single mother facing eviction, he finally let his calm crack. "You keep talking about fixing the engine, Olivia," he said, his voice tight. "But you're refusing to see the car is designed to run some people over. It's not a flaw. It's a feature." He held my gaze, and the ground under my feet, all the polished marble of my life, felt suddenly like sand. He wasn't trying to win an argument. He was telling me a truth I'd spent a lifetime learning to ignore. The shame that washed over me was hot, but clean. It burned away something false. The connection was a slow, inevitable drift. It was in the way he'd remember I liked my terrible coffee black and have a mug waiting. It was in the silent communication during client interviews, a slight shake of his head, a raised brow from me. It was in the way the frantic energy of the clinic would settle when he walked in. One December evening, it was just us, the rain sheeting down the high, grimy windows. I was exhausted, my shoulders aching. I muttered something about the endless, soulless holiday galas starting. He leaned back in his creaky chair. "What's your favorite sound?" The question was so absurd, so personal, it disarmed me completely. Without thinking, I whispered, "Gravel under tires on a back road, far away from here." He didn't smile. He just nodded, as if I'd given him the most important data point in the world. The resistance was a physical ache, a wall we kept rebuilding between us, brick by painful brick. It was in the way I'd jerk my hand back if our fingers grazed, the way I'd leave exactly at 8:59 p.m., building a moat of punctuality around my heart. The moment I'd get back in my car, the silence would rush in, but it was different now. It was the silence after a song ends, heavy with its echo. I'd sit in my driveway in Georgetown, watching the soft light from our upstairs window, and feel like a ghost visiting her own life. David would ask about my book, and I'd spin a plot about characters whose deepest conflicts felt like paper cuts compared to the fault lines splitting my soul. The whisper became a roar. A blog called Capital Glimpse ran a grainy, long-lens photo. Heir apparent. Hiding in plain sight? The caption speculated about my secret slumming. They didn't name the clinic. They didn't name Marcus. But they'd found the thread, and they were pulling. That night, David showed me the article on his tablet, his brow furrowed more in bewilderment than anger. "Olivia, what is this? Is this some kind of philanthropic phase?" The word phase did it. It reduced the only real thing in my life to a frivolity. I looked at him, this good, decent, distant man, in our impeccably decorated living room, every object chosen for effect, and I knew with a chilling certainty I could lie and preserve this beautiful emptiness, or I could speak and step into a terrifying open space. I didn't choose Marcus that night. I chose truth. Telling David was like performing surgery on myself without anesthetic. My voice was a thin, shaky thread, but it didn't break. "The marriage isn't real. I'm not who you think I am. I'm so sorry." The hurt in his eyes was profound, but it was the hurt of a man who realized he'd been reading a translation of a book, not the original text. I moved out with a single suitcase. I didn't call Marcus. I knew if I went to him then, he'd just be another life raft, another escape. I had to learn to swim in the open water alone. I rented a small, sunlit apartment in a neighborhood with noisy families and barking dogs. I used my law degree and my now notorious name to get a job at a housing advocacy nonprofit, fighting the very laws I'd been raised to venerate. The work was hard, the days were long, and the silence in my own apartment was mine. It was filled with my own thoughts, my own regrets, my own fragile peace. I saw him again on a bright, brutal Tuesday in July. I was leaving the county courthouse, a minor victory for a client tucked in my folder. He was coming up the worn granite steps, squinting against the sun. He stopped. The city noise faded again, that old trick. "Olivia?" He said my name like it was a solid thing, a stone to anchor to. We went to the diner near the old clinic. We talked about caseloads and incompetent judges and the new, terrible coffee machine his office had gotten. It was easy. It was terribly, wonderfully normal. When the check came, he didn't reach for it. He just looked at me, his eyes searching mine. "I heard you left. I heard you're at the coalition now." I nodded, my throat tight. "I needed to." "I know," he said softly. Then, after a heartbeat that stretched between us, he added, "I waited." The air left my lungs. "Marcus, you didn't have to." "Not for her," he interrupted, his gaze unwavering. "For you. The you that was in there, fighting to get out. I knew she'd be worth it." He didn't ask me to stay. He didn't ask for anything at all. He just paid the bill and walked me to the street. The sun was warm on my skin. He didn't kiss me. He just squeezed my hand, once, firm and real, before turning to go. And for the first time, I didn't feel like I was standing on a precipice. I felt like I was standing on new ground, my own ground. And I knew, with a calm that settled deep in my bones, that whatever happened next, it would be my choice. My honest, messy, terrifying, and real choice. The story wasn't about a rescue. It was about a woman who finally showed up for her own life and found, to her astonishment, that someone had been there all along, believing she would. The space between his hands squeezing mine and our first real date was 6 weeks. It wasn't a game. It was necessity. I had a life to figure out, and so did he. For the first time, I understood that love wasn't just a feeling you fell into. It was a place you built, and the foundation had to be level. My foundation was still settling, the ground still trembling from the earthquake of my leaving. I'd see him sometimes, in the courthouse cafeteria or hurrying down the street, a case file under his arm like a shield. We'd share a nod, a small, private smile that felt like a secret handshake. It was enough. It was more than I'd had in years, a connection that existed in the open air, not hidden in a basement. The waiting wasn't empty. It was full. I was learning the sound of my own laughter again, the kind that burst out unexpectedly at work over something silly. I was learning how to cook for one, making a mess in my small kitchen. I was learning that quiet didn't have to be lonely. Our first official date was at the quirky diner near the old clinic. No pretense, no marble steps. He wore the same dark suit from court. I wore a simple green dress. We split a plate of greasy fries and debated the worst Supreme Court ruling of the last 50 years. It wasn't romantic in the storybook sense. It was better. It was real. At the end of the night, standing under the flickering neon sign of the diner, he didn't ask to come up. He just cupped my face in his hands, his thumbs brushing my cheeks, and he looked at me with an intensity that made the city around us blur. "Olivia Grant," he whispered, my name a vow on his lips. And then he kissed me. It wasn't a stolen, desperate kiss. It was a claiming, a homecoming, a promise that tasted of coffee and freedom and a future we were both choosing, with our eyes wide open. We were careful at first. Or rather, I was. The ghosts of my old life weren't finished with me. A society page photographer snapped a picture of us leaving a movie theater, just holding hands. The headline was kinder this time, but it still burned. Grant Sion's new chapter, from gala to grassroots, my mother called. Her voice was ice-wrapped in silk. "You're making a spectacle of yourself, Olivia. And for what? A public defender?" The word in her mouth sounded like a disease. I held the phone, looking out the window of my apartment at the messy, vibrant street below. "For happiness, Mother," I said, my voice calm. "And it's not a spectacle. It's my life." I hung up before she could reply. My hands shook for an hour afterwards, but the core of me felt solid, like steel. Tears streamed down my face, silent and hot. I wasn't the girl on the marble steps anymore. I was the woman who'd survived the quiet, who'd earned her place in this messy, beautiful world. I looked around the dusty, sacred basement where I was reborn, and then back into the eyes of the man who had loved me into existence. "Yes," I said, my voice cracking with joy. 1,000 times. Yes. I pulled him up and kissed him there, in the heart of where it all began. The future stretched before us, not as a predetermined path, but as an open road. Our road. Gravel under tires, far away from here, together. The story wasn't about forbidden love anymore. It was about chosen love. And it was just beginning.